So welcome to another laser giveaway video. I have filmed this introduction multiple times now, and I keep having to change the lighting and whatnot. So hopefully this one ends up working. So this is another laser review for the Atezr P10. It's a 10-watt laser. And if you've been watching the channel, you know I've been getting a bunch of these lasers, and I don't plan on keeping more than 2 in the shop. So instead of getting greedy, I've decided to then review the lasers to fulfill what the company wants from me, which is a YouTube tool review, and then I've been giving them away. So the way to enter that contest is to just leave a comment below. I have a program that will randomly go through and pick one of the comments, and there's the winner. The last 2 winners, the winner from the previous contest will be announced tomorrow, so there will be 3. But the first 2 winners have gotten their lasers. It's not spam or anything like that. They've left comments on those videos saying that they got them. So if you don't trust me, you could go read those. No purchase necessary. I implore everyone to read the official rules. There'll be more in there than what I'm discussing here. I don't want these intros to be 15 minutes long, so hopefully people can read some of that information, but it's pretty straightforward and upfront. Technically, the lasers are mine to give away because I'm getting them for free after I do the tool review, but I always mention the company as well just to cover all my bases. And as always, YouTube is not associated or liable for this giveaway. That is a big one to cover. So that's pretty much that on that point. Holding the comments for review, which is what I've done on the last two laser giveaways, seems to be working quite well, so I'm going to continue doing that. Basically, to avoid spam, the comments for the giveaway videos go to a different inbox. I have to approve them, and then they get posted to the site, so it eliminates spammers coming in because I just delete their comments, which I have been getting before they even make it onto the page. So this, like I said, is a 10-watt machine. If you've been following along, last week I tested technically I posted that on Friday, was the 20-watt machine, and the machine before that was the 5-watt machine. The goal of those videos was to go through and test a plethora of products to see how well the lasers cut them and also how efficiently they cut them. So in order to kind of keep things going with that consistency, at least, I decided to do the same thing with the 10-watt laser. I'm assuming for people that are watching these that while they're informative, they're probably not the most entertaining videos to watch, which I'm well aware of, and they are not the most entertaining to film as well. I enjoy making products with these versus just doing tests. But I have been getting a lot of comments about people saying that they've been deciding between 2 machines and they can't figure out which one they want. And these test series I've been doing are very helpful. So that is one of the reasons I'm also doing it for the 10-watt. At the end of this one, because at this point I will have all 3, there's a little bit of a comprehensive guide showing you all the results. So hopefully someone really gets some good information out of it. As I say in all these videos, as far as the quality of the cut, every single one of these is pretty similar. If you take all of the samples I had and put them out on a table, I don't think anyone would really be able, unless you work for the company and see their products a lot, be able to pinpoint out the pieces, especially certain materials like wood. They're all pretty similar. The big differences are going to come with little things like how quickly does the machine go together. Some people don't like assembling these machines. How fast can you get a project done is a big one. That was a big deciding factor for myself to keep the X tool. But also price point. Some of these are very expensive, where some of them aren't as expensive. Whether you have a business or you're a hobbyist, all these little decisions come into play, and I'm hoping that doing these tool reviews will help people with that decision, because the little 5-watt machine I tested was more than sufficient to get a lot of this stuff done. I don't think you necessarily need to go out and buy the biggest and best model if you're just going to be making little trinkets and whatnot. So there is that. So this is the giveaway for this week. It's an Atezr P10. The honeycomb board is mine, so this one is just the laser giveaway. You can see I have an older air pump that one of the companies got me. A lot of these will hook up to every machine, so this has the air connection up here, which is nice. I like the ones that are easy to connect. This one also has a touch screen. I like the touch screens. These aren't really a make or break for me. They're kind of convenient, but I can get by without it. This one, which I'm testing pretty much at the same time that I was testing the Xtool D1, this was unintentional, but if you look at the two of them, especially the frame, they're almost identical. This one's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit taller, and the working area is one of the biggest ones I've used. This one and Dakota were the two biggest working areas. The gantry is a little different. The Xtool is going to ride on this rod right here, whereas this one has the rubber wheels are inside. You can't really see them, but here's the belt, and then the rubber wheels ride in a track in here. So that's really the only visual difference. Even the way the frame goes together, you could see, is almost identical. So this one is a very sturdy design. I had no problems with this except for the belt tensioning, which is always, at least in my circumstance, operator error. This one has the nicest self-adjusting, I personally think, on any laser. It's this nice large knob on the back, and this one, like the Xtool, also has a little foot. The Ortur had one of these too. A little foot that pops down. You could set the height adjustment and then pop it back up. I prefer these over the ones that have some sort of tool that you use that's separate from the machine, just because I don't want to lose it. And then the knob in the back makes it really easy to raise and lower the machine. But I like how this one has the not really hidden, but more concealed belts. I was running this machine and the Xtool all week while I was doing other work in the shop. I didn't have any problems with dust messing up the belts, which I have had problems with the belts that are exposed on the top of the machine. So all around a very solid unit. These ones that don't have drag chains are not going to be my favorite. I like it when these wires are concealed. However, this one does come with zip ties to zip tie this to parts of the frame, which will make the wires a little less obstructive. However, I don't use those when I'm doing a giveaway because I want the person who's getting it to be able to set those up. If I use the zip ties, I'd have to cut all the connections when I took this apart. Granted, I could just go buy some and do it myself, but I'm only testing these for a short amount of time, so these wires wouldn't be hanging out this much if it was your own unit. They do get kind of connected to the piece. And then obviously the limit switches, I've said before, I really like those. And this one and the Xtool are extremely easy to put together. The instructions are pretty straightforward. If that's one of your things, because I will read reviews of these on like Amazon and whatnot, and a lot of people complain about the time commitment to put these together. So if you have a little bit more money for a nicer model, these ones with these solid enclosed frames like this they're basically just a couple bolts in the corners and you're ready to go. So at this point, I'm sure a lot of you recognize this engraving board I have that I use for all the machines. I do this first. It's my logo because it's not a super intricate design, but it's intricate enough that it's going to give me a nice gauge of how this machine works, but also if I have it set up properly. Like I said, as far as simple designs and cutting like this, I have found all of the lasers to be on par with one another. I think where you're going to start seeing differences as well as far as engraving goes is if you're doing stuff like photos and you want to get fine detail. I honestly haven't been doing a lot of that stuff because I don't plan on doing that when I use them in my life, so I think that's where they'll set each other apart. So you kind of see, this mark is showing you where I remember to turn on the air pump, so you can see the difference in these engravings. When you do have an air pump, there's a lot less burning and you get a little more of a grayscale design versus a darker design. But I noticed that this was flattened. My image was flattened. I did a bunch of test cuts messing with the belts, and they were still flat. And then I tried a simpler design so it was faster, and that was also flat. And then I kind of realized by accident that there was a little bit of play in my gantry. And when I was putting this together, there are 2 set screws at this rod that connects the 2 Y-axis belts together, and I hadn't fully tightened them. Tightening those 2 set screws, not even a quarter of a turn, just a smidge, was they were loose enough that the belt was slipping and causing all those issues. I tightened them and I had no more problem. I point all that out because a lot of times with these machines there is going to be some operator error, and you're going to have to learn kind of the ins and outs of them. And Google searching some stuff is what led me to some of these fixes. So just a heads up if you plan on using them. I don't think they're the type of machine where you're never going to have any sort of maintenance on them. So if that is not your thing, these machines might not be for you. So then, like I said, I'm going to go through this pretty quick because I've had these same test cuts in multiple pieces at this point. I think it was safe to say that the 10 watt was going to be able to do everything the 5 watt and the 20 watt did. I was mainly looking for times and quality. So the only thing I didn't get with this one was I didn't go all the way through 1/2 inch plywood. I was able to do that with the 5 watt, but the bottom of that piece for the 5 watt burnt pretty bad. So I do think this machine would be capable of cutting through 1/2 inch ply, but I didn't want to deal with a bunch of burning. And the main reductive statement from that is going to be, if you want to cut 1/2 inch plywood, you're going to need a more powerful machine if you want to do it consistently, at least, because it's going to take a lot of passes to do it with a 5 watt or a 10 watt machine. The next up was foam. So like I said, I'm going through this stuff pretty fast. I'm going to have times and the settings for each machine in the description box. All of these machines were very different. This machine was nice because in the instructions they actually give you a pamphlet giving you an ideal of cut times for certain products. They didn't have all of the stuff I was cutting, but the preset ones that they had listed that I could use were usually dead on accurate. I didn't have to do multiple cuts. Here's coated aluminum. This is actually a baked on enamel coating on top of aluminum flashing. That worked really well. The cork, I didn't try cutting this cork because none of the other machines could do it. But you could see that engraving was a little bit darker. I messed with the settings and I got a really nice engraving off of the cork as well. And then I could move forward with, this is the silk nylon. I mention this in every video. Anything that's transparent, you're going to want a black backer behind it. This one was able to cut the silk nylon as well. But the 5 watt machine worked the most efficiently on the thinner materials. Obviously it worked the least efficiently on the thicker, harder materials. And then canvas, these canvas swatches are actually pretty cool. I could see turning these into patches or something like that. And then for the slate coaster, I decided to take the protective feet off of the back side of one I had already engraved because I didn't want to keep, these coasters are not expensive, but they're also not cheap. So I wanted to just utilize the bottom of it instead of putting another engraving of my logo on a coaster that I probably will not use. And then cordboard. I think cordboard and cardstock are going to be kind of the same sort of thing where you could cut out these stencils and use them for all sorts of stuff. Transferring patterns would be really handy with something like this. I could see myself utilizing this in the future. It transfers a pattern very quickly. And once again, the logo, it's not optimized for cutting on the laser, but I haven't really had a lot of issues with cutting the logo on the laser. Next up is going to be plexiglass. Now this one, they gave me settings for plastic, which worked well in the sense that of all of the tests I've done on plexi, they cracked the glass in certain spots. This one did not. And I think the reason for that is it was the lightest engraving of all of the ones I did. So you could see when I take off all of the galvanized compound on top of it, it's the lightest engraving, but it didn't crack the surface. So I am assuming the preset was based on not cracking the surface of the plexi. If the laser gets too hot, it leaves little hairline cracks in there. And then this one, engraved leather, the nicest. Now, like I said, I'm going through with these settings and getting an end result that I could transfer to a video. If this was my personal laser and I was planning on cutting all of these materials, I would go through and optimize these settings and get them perfect. But leather was one of the preset settings in the instruction manual, and it came out the best out of all of them. And then glass. Glass is actually pretty cool to do. Like I said, with transparent stuff, I'm doing two things. I have the black background, but also you can spray this galvanized compound on the top and it will etch glass through that galvanized compound. It's kind of a cheat around using the compound or the black in order to focus the laser on the top or the bottom side in order to etch that glass. You can't do it without these sorts of workarounds on these wattage lasers. You can see where the compound will etch on the top, the black will etch on the bottom side because the laser goes through the glass and then focuses on the black. And then I finished up with the ceramic tile. I did these much smaller than you've seen because these took 23 minutes each. They etched really nicely. Once again, these were presets that I had, so that's why those came out nicely. And then this is the part I was talking about where I put all this information I've gathered together, always going from right to left, 5 watt, 10 watt, 20 watt laser, and you see the times. So the times are really the sticking point for me because, like I keep saying, this is a business. And while the 5 watt performed really well, you can see there's the 1/2 inch plug I was talking about that burnt, it's going to go substantially slower than these more powerful machines. And I could almost get through 3/4 inch ply with the 20 watt. I was able to get to 3/4 inch pine with the 20 watt. But in a minute I will zoom in on these plugs and you'll be able to tell while the times are very different, the quality of the engravings are almost identical, especially for the wood because I've had the most experience with the wood, so the settings I had a little more dialed in at that point. And then next up is the foam. Once again, just comparing all of these tests. The 5 watt laser gave me the nicest cut on the foam. You could kind of see that from the images. The 20 watt, I have an assumption that's based on purely my assumption that it was a little too powerful for some of these thinner products. So in order to get a little bit of a cleaner cut comparable to the 5 watt, you might have to really spend some time fine-tuning those settings. Because stuff like foam, I couldn't find great information on initial settings to try. Rubber, same thing. The 10 watt laser, sometimes in certain circumstances, the 10 watt laser was a little bit slower than the 5 watt laser, but it gave me a much cleaner engraving. You could see the rubber engraving on the 10 versus the 1 was much different. And then for the cork, I also did this double-sided, so this is the 5 watt, but the 10 watt was slower because it was my logo, which makes sense, and that was a very crisp engraving of the logo. So if I was doing the B with the 10 watt laser, obviously it would be faster. And then, but still across the board, the 20 watt laser was the fastest. But I have to hone those settings a little bit more because they are so different than the 5 and the 10 watt. The aluminum, doing these on aluminum is something I could see myself doing in the future. It just leaves a really nice finish. And then once again, going through all of these, this etch through the baked on enamel. I get these, this is flashing pieces that I get from Lowe's. I apologize for the shadow. I was trying to light this properly. The 10 watt, once again, was a really nice grayscale finish. The 20 watt was much faster, but you can see it burns through most of the baked enamel. If you want to get more of a grayscale, you can lower your settings. I had the settings really high, so it was burning through most of that material. And then for this is a nylon silk fabric, same sort of results. The 20 watt, once again, on these thinner materials was, I think, just a little too powerful. So it was almost melting or burning some of the materials. The thinner materials, the 5 watt, really shone through. So same thing for, this is the canvas plugs, which I think are pretty cool. Same sorts of results. The 10 watt is a much cleaner engraving. It was a little bit slower than the 5 watt because of that. And then once again, similar issues with the 20 watt, but still all of them producing. The mark in the 20 watt, if you didn't watch that video, is because the machine caught on the canvas. It was a much cleaner engraving before then. And then to the slate, these all performed really well on slate. You could tell that they etched through the surface. It's not just on top of the surface. And then the 20 watt was so fast, you'll notice that all of the engravings are larger, so take that into account. Not only does it engrave faster, but it's engraving larger engravings faster. And then the 10 watt, I did the little sample on the back, and those were about the same sort of time frame, which is why I only have 1 minute mark on the bottom there. And then going through the cordboard, I engraved the first one because it was pretty cool to see the engraving. I imagine they'd all be able to engrave on paper products as well. And there are the times for those. And then, like I said, we just saw the leather for the 10 watt was the nicest engraving out of all of them. But the 5, and obviously it's because they're circles, it's because each one is capable of cutting out leather as well. I should have amped up the settings for the X tool. It's the faintest engraving, but the 10 watt is a little not slower than the 5 watt, but it was a much nicer engraving, which is why it took longer. The plexi, this is the first one I did with the 5 watt, which was able to do plexi. It's the faintest, and you can see those little hairline cracks I was talking about. And then the 10 watt as well down in the corner. That was a preset number. I think that could be tweaked to get a little nicer product. And the 20 watt as well. Now the 20 watt cut through the plexi, but like I said in that video, as it was cutting a little bit later, it melted through it, which is why it's still connected to the sheet, which is a problem when you're heating stuff like plastic that heats up and then can melt back together. And these all worked on glass. The 5 watt was sliding on the machine, which is why it's a skewed engraving, but you could see it worked on glass for all of them. And the glass settings I had for the 10 watt were the best. It was the nicest etching out of all of them. That was also a preset, which was those presets in the instructions were really nice. You can see the difference between engraving on the black and with the compound is going to give you 2 different looks, so that's something to consider when you're engraving as well, whether you like the way the compound looks or the way you like the black background looks. And then lastly, the ceramic. Once again, they all worked quite well. This engraving on the bottom with the 5 watt, the bigger one was with the 5 watt, and that took 2 hours, which is why I made these much smaller for the other ones. I don't plan on doing a lot of stuff with ceramic for one of those reasons. It was pretty slow process.